everyone, and welcome to today's episode. We're going to be talking about Her Mistaken Identity Cowboy by Karen Baney. So, this one is a contemporary romance and it fits within the Christian fiction category. And it's also the first book in Karen's new series, Love at Vargas Ranch, which is in the Vargas Ranch story world. So, why did I want to read this one? Well, I've enjoyed reading Karen's books in the past, including books from her Vargas Ranch story world, being Falling for a Real Cowboy and Falling for a Devoted Cowgirl. And you can find my book recommendations at my blog. There'll be a link in the show notes, and that's at my website at narelleatkins.com. And I've also recorded episode 9 on Falling for a Devoted Cowgirl. So you can go check out episode 9 as well to learn more about the series and the story world. So I'm going to add my usual disclaimer and say many thanks to the author for providing an advance reader copy, and all the opinions that I express in this episode are completely my own. So let's talk about the book. Her Mistaken Identity Cowboy is set in Arizona. So we're in the desert and we're not that far from Phoenix on a ranch. And so we have a number of romance tropes in this one. So obviously it's a cowboy book, so it's a Western, and we have our hero who's a ranch hand. We also have mistaken identity in the story, as you probably guessed from the title. We have an evil twin, which I'll get to soon. We have enemies to love trope, the romance trope, and that really plays out where they go from enemies to friends to more than friends, which I really liked. We have forced proximity because our main characters are working together at the ranch. We have family drama, as you probably guessed, if there's an evil twin, there must be family drama. And our evil twin is a criminal who's wanted by the law and also a con artist. So there's a lot happening in this story. So let's talk about the first line. It's a cracker of a first line, which is this one. All the stereotypes about identical twins finishing each other's sentences and being besties for life, those were lies. And as I said, this is a fabulous opening line. It's a big opening line, and it hooked me into this story straight away. I actually read this book within a day, and I just couldn't put it down. I was so invested from the opening line. I was completely hooked in and wanted to know what was going on. So I'm going to introduce you to our hero who we meet in chapter 1 who's thinking this, and his name is Parker. He's 30 years old and he's the good twin. And his identical twin brother is the criminal con artist, evil twin that I was talking about before. Now, at the start of the story, Parker's a ranch hand, and for the last 2 months, he's just got himself a job at Vargas Ranch. So he's finding his feet. And he really wants to stay there for a long time because he's had trouble keeping jobs. And that relates to the fact he's been falsely arrested multiple times when people look at his face and they mistake him for his brother. And so his identical twin brother is a criminal. He's wanted by the law. There's multiple warrants out for his arrest. He's a fraudster and con artist. And basically, he steals money from vulnerable people and disappears with their money. And he is a very unlikable, detestable character who is just, I mean, I'm going to call this character evil because evil is really the only word that describes what's actually going on here. And so Parker is sick of being mistaken for his twin. He's sick of the negative consequences that go from that, where he's lost jobs and also lost money as well. There's a whole lot of stuff that's happened because of the mess his twin leaves behind that he gets blamed for. So, chapter 1, at the beginning of the story, we really have Parker really wanting a fresh start at Vargas Ranch and wanting to not have all this awful family history with his twin causing him grief in his life. But as you know, it's a story and that's unlikely to happen. So we'll keep going. We'll talk about Shannon. So she's our leading lady. She's 28 years old and she's an events manager. She effectively works for her great aunt who has a charity foundation, and she does corporate events, fundraisers, and different things for her aunt. And her aunt tells her about this job at Vargas Ranch. So, Vargas Ranch has an equine program for children with disabilities and also veterans, and they're looking to do some serious fundraising so they can expand the program to help more people. Now, if you've read Karen's books at Vargas Ranch, you'll know exactly what I'm talking about because it all ties into the history of that. But you don't have to have read the previous series to follow what's going on in the story at all. It's just a fun extra for people who have read the previous book. And so she turns up at the ranch basically ready to apply for a job and meet the bosses, etc., etc. Now, our meet cute, there's only one word to describe it. It is dynamite. It is like a nuclear bomb blows up the way this meet cute plays out. So Shannon sees Parker at the ranch, and that would be okay, except for the fact she mistakes Parker for being his twin brother. And she has an extreme emotional reaction, an extreme panic attack. And she basically calls the police and gets Parker arrested. And it's a pretty big scene, and there's a lot that goes into what's happening. So 8 years ago, Shannon got mixed up with Parker's twin brother, the rotten twin brother, and she dated him, and he lied to her, he manipulated her, totally love bombed her. She thought that he might be someone that she could marry one day. Like, he really hooked her in. And then he stole all of her money, disappeared, and she was at college. He took everything, and he just put her in a really horrible situation where she had to rely on family to help her out. And his actions really tried to destroy her life. So she really hasn't gotten over what happened 8 years ago because he's never been arrested, and he just keeps on doing the same old con, hurting and hurting and hurting more people as time goes on. And so Shannon has this moment in time where she thinks, oh my goodness, finally he's going to get justice. Finally, he's going to get what he deserves. And finally, he's going to get arrested. But of course, that's not what happens because she works out that it's the wrong brother and that she's mistakenly got an innocent man arrested. So, as you can imagine, we start this story with so many problems. And both of our leading characters, they've got some pretty big emotional wounds from the past. I mean, Parker just can't escape his twin brother's crimes. Like, it doesn't matter. He can hide out at a ranch and they still follow him. So he's weary. He's really, really weary of having to deal with the fallout and the mess caused by his brother. And his family of origin, having grown up with his twin brother, I mean, these people don't turn 18 and magically become terrible criminals. There's always a history, and his brother was awful when they were growing up. He's dishonest, lies, all of that. There's been major strife in the family as his brother started getting into trouble with the law, and the parents weren't able to do anything about it, and he was a law unto himself. And he's had a really, really hard childhood where he's been the victim of some pretty extreme emotional abuse. And I would look at that situation and say, yes, it was definitely a domestic violence situation that he was dealing with. And the domestic violence was inflicted by his twin brother. So that's where his emotional baggage is with his family of origin. Now, Shannon has her own emotional baggage. She has some issues that go back to her family of origin as well that she needs to work through. But at the beginning of the story, her most pressing issue is that she was the victim of this terrible con artist who financially abused her and stole her money, who emotionally abused her. And so she is joining Parker, and the pair of them have some really, really big trust issues. And that was a very big aspect of the story in terms of how hard it was for both of them to trust other people because of how badly abused they have been and the emotional abuse they've experienced from the evil twin. And so there's so much emotional baggage and so many emotional wounds that need to be healed in this story. And the betrayal ran really, really deep for both of them. The trust issues were big. They've both been lied to. They've both been manipulated. They've both been discarded. They've both had someone treat them abysmally. it was quite hard in some respects to read this because there was just so much emotional hurt that had happened in the past. And to top it all off, Shannon is the ex-girlfriend. So Parker's now thinking, when she looks at my face, does she see me or does she see him? So there were all of those added complications that went with it as well. And the family drama. So Parker's family of origin, a whole lot of stuff's happened in the past. There's some present issues going on, and it's these people are poisonous and toxic. And the poison and the toxin, even if they're physically not involved in their lives, and in this case, he's absent because he's on the run and no one knows where he is. Just because they're not involved in the family doesn't mean the stench and the toxins and the poison isn't still infecting the family. So there's a lot of healing that needs to happen with both characters in terms of how they cope with what's happened and how do they manage the fallout because of all the lies and all the toxicity and all the broken relationships that they're dealing with. So, as I said, lots and lots of problems that need to be overcome in this story. So, my favorite book quote from the story is this one. There was something peaceful about working with animals, about the honest exchange of care for trust that had nothing to do with manipulation or hidden agendas. And it's one of our main characters, obviously, that's thinking this, but both of them could have actually thought this at different times in the story because they've both been so hurt by a master manipulator with hidden agendas who really was happy to harm them and happy for them to suffer and happy to ruin their lives and walk away and whitewash it as if nothing had happened and then move on to the next target. There was so much going on in this story. And so, in terms of the faith elements, I would describe the faith elements as being both strong on the page as well as relevant to the story and very organic to the story. We're dealing with trust issues, we're dealing with forgiveness themes. Justice, of course, is a massive theme in this book because our evil twin is on the run and there is no justice in this world that anyone's seeing at the start of the story. And our characters, in terms of their faith journeys, we see their faith journeys on the page, and they really are on a healing journey to recover from this horrendous emotional abuse, financial abuse that they have experienced as a result of past events in connection to the evil twin. So, in terms of the impact on me, as I said, I read this book quickly because I could not put it down. I needed to know what was happening next. I was very invested in the story and the characters. And it really did make me think because I empathize so much with these characters who just been hurt by this evil person who the the lengths that this person went to hurt people was just unimaginable. It was just diabolical. And I have a lot of empathy for people that are dealing with family members that are just so abusive. And often the abuse is invisible because it's emotional. And these people lie and put on a happy face and they pretend they're the nicest person you'll ever meet. And really, they're snakes and vipers. So I just had so much empathy for the characters. And the injustice that they were dealing with, it was just so unfair. And particularly for Parker, who was just constantly dealing with unfair situations as well, it was just really hard. And the cruelty, and the twin was just so cruel in the way he treated people. It was just awful to hear what had happened. And he was targeting vulnerable seniors as well and stealing their money and emptying their bank accounts, and it was just really horrible. It's just a despicable, disgusting excuse of a human being. And the family, we can't forget that the family of these perpetrators are also victims because they've had to grow up and deal with these people. And you can walk away from a friend and a friendship that's gone sour because you've worked out that they're a toxic personality. But when it's a family member who's a toxic personality, it's a completely different ball game. And the rules are different, and it's harder to break contact with family members because people expect you to see your family at Christmas. And if you're in the States, to see your family at Thanksgiving. And so when you break away from family and say, no, I'm not putting up with narcissistic abuse. No, I'm not putting up with your toxic behavior. I'm not putting up with your lies and your manipulation. Then people will make judgments if you do that, that may or may not reflect the truth. And it's just really messy and really untidy. And I appreciate the sensitivity in the way that Karen went through all these issues in the story and the way she handled it. And it was really quite educational to see the way this story played out. And the evil twin, like, there's zero empathy with people like this. He would just do a runner with the stolen money, and then probably while he's running out the door with the money, he's lining up the next victim because he didn't have an honest job. He basically lived off ill-gotten gains and blood money and had blood on his hands and just left this mess behind and just couldn't care less about the mess that was there. And it was just so hard for Parker because while his brother is on the run, he just can't escape the shadow of having the same face as this malicious criminal who just steals from people. And it was heartbreaking for the victims who are dealing with all this because this guy is a master manipulator, con artist. He's a liar, he's entitled, selfish, can put on all the fake charm and talk a good story, but there's no substance and he's just calculating and people are assets or liabilities. And as soon as he's used up the asset and taken their money, he spits them out. They become a liability, moves on and moves on to the next target, and totally above the law. No care factor for the fact he's breaking the law. No care factor for anything like that. Just ruthlessly selfish in how he behaves. And it was a pattern of behavior that kept going round and round and round. And there were just so many victims. It was just awful. And he was the con artist that was playing the short game. So he'd go in, target the victim, butter them up, charm them out of their money, and then run and disappear, find the next person. But there are also people like this that will play a long game. And an example of that is your gold digger who will marry for money and they can spend decades lying and manipulating and love bombing and controlling their victims. And sometimes their victims don't even realize that they're trapped in these situations. And it can go on for decades and they can get away with it quite so easily unless people can see through the deception and see through the lies. And it's just really evil. There's just no other words to describe these people as evil. And it's domestic violence when family members are the victims as well. And both of our leading characters are victims of domestic violence. Although for our leading lady, it was a shorter period of time. So Shannon only had him in her life, I think, for maybe 6 months. It wasn't a long period of time. Whereas Parker's had a life, 30 years of misery being related to this man. And the long suffering family members, often there is no end because of the way that these people behave and the consequences of their behavior. And it was just really relatable just to see these toxic people spreading their poison because this is what happens in real life. This is not just a fictional story. I found it really relatable in terms of knowing people who have maybe not been as extreme in terms of being criminals, being wanted by the law, but definitely behaving badly and hurting people with no thought to anything. And in their weird way, they can somehow justify it. And it's just, yeah, this story had a big impact on me. Normally, my impact on me section is really short, but in this one, it's really long because it really did have a big impact on me, and I really did think about a lot. And the importance of the healing journey was such a big theme in this book, and how there's sort of no one right way to sort of get to healing as well. Like everyone will have their own unique path to walk depending on how they were hurt and who it was that hurt them and the circumstances. And there's a lot of emotional stuff to work through. And I had so much compassion for the victims. And I loved the faith journeys in the story, how they were on the page and how we got to see the characters moving through different stages, including grief, because there's grieving of a relationship that you thought was there that really isn't there. The person you thought you knew isn't who they really are. And there was that stage for some of our characters to go through as well to get to a point of acceptance and healing. And the thing that I really did think about is that justice in this world often doesn't happen. There's so many unfair and unjust things that people get away with. And the thing that really does bring me comfort is that God sees what's going on. God hears what's going on, and God knows what's going on. And ultimately, God's justice will prevail at some point in time. And I think that is a very comforting thought for people that have experienced emotional abuse from toxic personalities. So, in summary, I would recommend this book to readers who like the mistaken identity trope, who like the twist on the evil twin in terms of how this plays out in the story, because we do have a villain in this book, who like the enemies to love via the friendship route trope as well. So our characters start off with a big bang in terms of the enemies, but we do move to a friendship and we do progress to a friends to more relationship. And if you like romances with cowboys and ranchers and forced proximity because they're working together, if you like characters that have some really deep emotional wounds and are dealing with some really hard situations and some deeply personal past hurts and are on a healing journey, then you'll like this one. And if you like your characters who are dealing with hard issues and are prepared to actually sit down and talk about it and communicate, and they have honest communication where they take responsibility for what is theirs to take responsibility for and talk through problems, then you'll like this one. And if you like your romances with family drama with a toxic family member running wild, then you'll like this one. And if you like your contemporary romances with strong faith elements that include trust issues and forgiveness themes and justice is addressed as well, then you'll like this one too. Thanks for joining me today. Does Her Mistaken Identity Cowboy sound like a book that you'd like to read? Have you read it? What did you think? You can let me know. If you're listening on the podcast, you can send me a text via a link in the show notes. If you're watching at YouTube, you can like the episode at YouTube and also leave a comment at YouTube. And you can also email me at my website, and you can find that at narelleatkins.com, and I have a contact form there that you can fill out. And also, if you've enjoyed this episode, please subscribe. And you can do that at your favorite podcasting app, or you can subscribe at YouTube, and then you'll get a notification of when my next episode drops. And so you won't miss an episode. And also, if you've enjoyed this episode, please share the link with a friend, especially a friend who likes reading contemporary romances and cowboy books, and a friend who you think would enjoy reading Karen's books. Thanks for tuning in, and see you next time.